Penguin has TikTok on his phone, so that means that he knows about the Costco guys.
My gosh.
So I just think that's really funny.
You're lucky that you got some flashbacks with him as a kid, and you're like, no. That's who he was before TikTok. It's cool. We already knew he
It's
was
a
like that.
double chunk chocolate cook.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and Frank is not with me today, but my friend Bobby is there. That's why I knew it. I had to say it somehow, but doesn't matter. I'm not starting over again. Bobby, how are you today?
Good. How about you?
I'm good. Thanks for being here. Last second, Bobby and I are here to talk about the Penguin, but before we do that, we're going to talk about what we're drinking. Bobby, what are you having today?
I just got a good old fashioned Corona.
Can't beat it. Yeah, it's great. You can't beat a good Corona, though I very much approve of your Infinity Gauntlet bug.
Yep.
Excellent.
I don't remember where I got this, but it's really cool.
It is great. It is great. I am drinking an Allagash Gatherwell, which is a bourbon barrel aged stout from Portland, Maine. Ooh. It's an excellent beer if you can get anything from Allagash is great, but their the Gatherwell is really, really good. Do recommend. Though it does have an 11% 11% content. So, drink responsibly. But Bobby, we're here to talk about the Penguin.
We're gonna do much more than 11% content.
Yeah, aren't we just? So we're here to talk about the Penguin. We'll do a thought. Like did you like it or not like it? No spoilers for both of us, and then we'll just get right into spoilers because it's hard to talk about it without really getting into some of the meat of the story. So, Bobby, did you like it?
I really, really had a good time with this one. Like, we were talking pretty much week to week as this was going on. This is like prestige television in a way that, like, I'm a fan of a lot of different DC shows that have been on Max and things like that. But stuff like, as good as it is, like Doom Patrol, Krypton, haven't really met the same, like, prestige as Penguin gets. And every episode in this one is just a winner.
I agree with that. I think there's been some really quality DC television content for a while, but I think the Penguin is just far and above anything else. It's got that I don't know, almost like Dark Knight quality to it, where you're like, this isn't even a superhero thing anymore or a comic book thing. This is just beyond its own genre, almost like even like Road to Perdition in some way, right? Like, yeah, it was based on a comic, but it just like so much exceeds beyond its original fare, I guess.
Right.
And that's not to say that like what it comes from, because it's based on a continuation of the Batman. It takes place like the week after the movie The Batman ends, but in a lot of ways it even exceeds the Batman. I found it way more engaging, and well, it is in some ways more character driven, but like it has a lot more time to be character driven, but it fits really nicely into that world. And it's pretty relentless. It doesn't stop. And I loved every second of it. It is easily one of the best things that DC has ever done. And not just new like DC Studios DC, which is technically, isn't that nice? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not just DC Studios, but because technically this is the first thing that has their brand on it.
It gets tricky because he did his whole like Blue Beetle is kind of or whatever. But this is like the first official thing with like the logo. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of it, unless you count Superman, the Christopher Reeve documentary, which also has the DC logo on it. So if you count both, so far 2 for 2. They're just they're really just winning. So I'm very happy. So anyway, let's talk spoilers. Through and through. We'll talk spoilers in and out. I'm not going to dive directly into a spoiler. So just be warned, everybody. What I think, we talked about this texting a little bit, but I want to say it on the show, is that I just really love how it took what is generally a pretty B character
Hmm.
in the Penguin, and not a B character in that he's not important to the Batman mythos or that he doesn't have some quality stories, but he's not, his antagonism comes from like being part of the Gotham world as opposed to someone like the Joker that's going to cause mass chaos for
Yeah.
everybody.
Hmm.
That's very rare for the Penguin. He's much more of a background player, in some ways almost like the Kingpin, right? From Marvel. But because of that, he can be sometimes like his personality can be an enigma sometimes. And he never really
Enigma.
feels, and not Edward Nigma. He never feels as dangerous as some of the other Gotham rogues can.
Yeah.
And I found in this pretty human based comic book story that he is kind of just the worst, like as a human. Like just by being in the room with him, he will corrupt you to be the worst version of yourself. And he will somehow get you to think that what you're doing is of your own volition or of your own action and that you're
Hmm.
doing the right thing. It's really interesting because he does it to literally everybody. He does it to Victor as like kind of this clean slate, like nice kid, but he also does it to people who are like trying to start fresh. Like if you look at it from
He's so good at it in the whole show.
right, which one actually struck me more than like say his like complete manipulation of Victor or Sophia or anything is actually Maroni,
Mm.
because Maroni is like Salvatore Maroni is not a good person. Like he's the head of the rival mob family. He's in Blackgate prison. Like he's not a great guy by any stretch of the imagination. But Oz somehow makes him even worse because he like directly, in some ways indirectly, makes him give in to his worst feelings and his worst bits of aggression, and I guess every vice that he has within himself, he kind of like taps into those things and makes you channel that for your
Yeah.
own demise. And it's just like, so like Maroni, I guess is where the spoiler is, like Maroni, like
Clancy Brown himself.
Clancy Brown, the amazing Clancy Brown himself, like Oz manipulates him into like being part of this gang war, even though he's in prison and like all this stuff, but which causes the deaths of people in that Maroni is close to and his family, whatever else. And
Right.
so he makes Maroni care so much from when we see him in the first episode and he doesn't care at all, or the second episode, wherever he appears. Like he has
The
no,
first one, I think.
right.
Yeah.
He has no feeling, no involvement, no anything. And by the end, he dies of a heart attack because he cares so much. Right. And
Scene was so good, but it took me a while to figure out because I was like eating at the same time I was watching it, and it's a pretty quick, like I could piece it together as I was watching, but I was like, oh, did I just miss the death of like the second main villain of the show?
you sure did. Yeah. Sometimes I feel that way with shows where, like, especially like this, where I'm like, oh no, I zoned for a second and now I've missed several key bits of information. No, what have
Hmm.
I done? I got to go back.
No, yeah, I really like just how in this show you're not supposed to be like Oz Cobb, the biggest like crime lord in Gotham or whatever. Like they very much illustrate that he is just even in like in the crime circles that he's part of, like total loser. Which is why like even though he's this awful person in the context of the show, it's just you get a sense of like pride whenever he sticks it to like Sal,
Hmm.
Sophia, uh, even his mom in some bits. Like as bad as that sounds,
Hmm.
like
I know what you mean,
nobody
though.
in this show, apart from like Vic, is I think like a really good person.
No, no one is. No, I
And like that's
absolutely
half the
agree with
charm.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the tragedy of Victor too, in that
Hmm.
like he like his home gets destroyed and his family dies because of the Riddler's attack on Gotham. And so he ends up in this situation where he's just like trying to survive because nobody in the
Right.
city is going to help him except for Oz, which gives you
Hmm.
this in on Oz where you're like, oh, he has a heart in some way, like Victor has a heart. So they're connected, like they're both disabled in their own way. Victor has a speech impediment and Penguin has a clubbed foot. And so they like bond over
I
this
really like giving him the
vulnerability.
club.
Me too. Great. It was like really gross. It's awesome. And you know what his club foot reminded me of when you
What?
see it, when you take it off? It looked like the Penguin's like flipper from Batman
Yeah.
Returns, like, but in foot form. And it was awesome. It felt like this really nice bit of like a nice
Mhm.
intertextuality or nice callback. Like, this
It's
is for
also
you
so cool
people.
because like Colin and Danny DeVito, like they're pretty good friends.
Are they? I did not know
Yeah,
that.
I think they became friends in the live action Dumbo. They were both in that.
Right. I
And then they
forgot they were
asked
both
Danny
in that.
DeVito like a ton of questions on press jackets and stuff. Like, what do you think about Colin Farrell? And he's just like, I love Colin. It's so good.
That's
That's
awesome.
that's another thing too. Like throughout each episode in this show, apart from episode 4, because like I don't remember if he was in it. It took me like I was just astounded that this is the actor Colin Farrell.
People said that about watching him in the Batman too. Like, and I agree, but it's in this show really more like that allows him to really
Yeah,
flex those muscles and he becomes less of a caricature in a lot of ways. Like he's like, I'm, Italian Brooklyn mob boss
take
guy,
it easy, sweet
Yeah,
guy.
right. But in a lot of ways, from this show, you feel like a lot of that is kind of an act in of itself. Like all of it is just to throw people off his scent as much as possible, which I really appreciate. But it's funny because there are some scenes in the show and some episodes where he is really unrecognizable. And then there
Mhm.
are others where you can really see it in his eyes, like obviously, because that's like the
Yeah,
only part of him that's not makeup in a lot of ways. But you can like he really is doing all like
he's doing the work.
he's doing the work. He's doing a lot of work. And I've never really seen a movie in maybe in the last 10 years, maybe even 15 years, where Colin Farrell has not been doing a lot of work.
Mhm.
But there's something very particular about this character, and he's spoken about like the makeup and the bodysuit and being very freeing as an actor that like he's allowed to create something so outside of himself. But
Yeah,
like you can also tell it was grueling. Like because I think he said in some interview where he's like, you know, once Oz is very difficult because like the whole show is like as a script is like 500 pages. And so it gets like whereas a movie is only 120 pages generally and you're not in every scene. But he's
yeah.
in almost every single scene of every single episode. And Oz is a talker, as Farrell said. So once he gets going, he's just always talking all the time. Just goes
Mhm.
and goes and goes and goes. And I'm sure that was exhausting, but truly it paid off because I haven't maybe since Heath Ledger's Joker, where I have like watched a character like an actor really do something so
Yeah,
extraordinarily different with the character. And that's like not a joke. Like I could maybe pinpoint to Tom Hardy's Bane, but that in some ways
that's
feels
like a whole different beast. Yeah.
it also feels a little bit more like we can caricature it in a way
Hmm.
that's more amusing than just like an actor being unrecognizable. Yeah,
Well,
and
he
it
is recognizable as Richard Kind.
sure was. Sure was. Yeah,
No,
I
one
love
of my favorite things about Oz is like you get the sense that he's like this Iago type character. You know, it was so good.
explain that
He's
for our
just
non-Shakespeare fans out there.
yeah, no, it's just like Iago and Othello.
Hmm.
manipulates just every single character in that play. And like, he's not the strongest, the best leader or anything like that. Oz is just, he's so good when it comes to his manipulations. And it's like, I got a lot of vibes from Iago, like I said, circling back to HBO stuff, like Littlefinger was a big one.
Yep.
Like, and my favorite, because a lot of the manipulations he's doing on like the main characters, Sophia, Sal, Vic, but I love how he uses like his experience with the streets in I think it's episode 6 with all the gang leaders. It could be
Hmm.
episode 7, but yeah, he's like using his under like privileged roots to just get in with it. And I really like that because classic comic Penguin, as you know, is just like a I come from old money and
Hmm.
stuff. Like he doesn't really have to try when it comes to making alliances and things like that.
Hmm.
This Oz is very much on the out. Even if by the end of the show, he's very much an outsider, and I really like that as opposed to just like him gaining all the power, which he kind of does, but you know,
It's interesting
it's a
that so like
tragedy.
he definitely gains all the power, but it like in controlling the families and whatever else, but it also is very much he is in an isolated ivory tower by the
Hmm.
end, right? So he's in the skyscraper that he and his mom talked about, like looking over the city and all this stuff, but he's alone in
Yeah.
doing that, which is so tragic because he chooses to do that, right? He
Hmm.
chooses to be alone. So he really full spoilers here, but like has his mom has a stroke and
Hmm.
she is immobile, and so she's just stuck like with him, but she's not, but because she can't respond to him anymore, there's an ice they're both isolated now
It's so
through the
good.
choices that they've made. Hers, like, she made the best decision she could at the time, which led to this. And then
Hmm.
him, but the only person there to keep him company is like his prostitute, who he is paying to be there. It's not a real relationship. And
Yeah.
you get that at the end, because at the end he has the prostitute dress like his mom, like to be his mother instead of his mother, who is also in the building in a vegetative state. And so like none of it's real. It's
Hmm.
all a facade. Like everything he builds up even is a facade. Even like when he gets out of his nice new purple car and he goes into the skyscraper to like look over the city, he's got his like top hat, which is a nice little like nod for Penguin fans and whatever else, but nobody wears them anymore. So even like
Yeah.
his idea of being on top, or like being the heads of the families or the head of the mob or anything like that, or heads of the city, whatever, it's all fake. It's none of it is actually like real. It's only
Hmm.
what he perceives as his reality. It's very, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Cutting back to the prostitute, I just wanted to point out that that's a segue, by the way.
That's a good segue. It was a segue enough.
um, I love how a ton of people. I remember when they were like, "Oh, we're making him Cobb," and Matt Reeves was saying like, "We're gonna do like another grounded Batman thing." People were all up in arms and things like that.
Hmm.
But like, my favorite thing is how like comic booky this show is, because the prostitute
Her
is
name's Eve, by the
Eve
way.
Carlo.
Yeah, I had to look it up.
Like, obviously, I don't think I was never expecting her to be like, "Hey, it's me, Clayface's sister," or
Eve.
anything like
Yeah,
that.
sure. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love how like everybody is somebody in this show. There's no like, apart from Vic, there's no like OCs.
No,
At least I don't think.
yep. No, I don't think so.
The
Everybody's
doctor.
somebody. Yep, Dr. Rush.
Yeah.
Um,
Everybody was like, "Oh, he could be like Scarecrow or Hugo Strange or whatever." He's just a guy.
he's just a guy, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need guys,
Yeah.
like that's okay. But you're right. Like there's Sophia Falcone, there's her brother
Mhm.
Alberto, there's Salvatore Moroni, Johnny Vitti. Like they
Johnny
are
Vitti,
Johnny Vitti.
Michael Kelly, Steve Lombard, Man of Steel.
Totally forgot. I like we talked about this. Totally forgot he was in that movie. No recollection of that whatsoever until you said it, and I was like, "That's where I know that guy." Absolutely. But you're right. I think it pulled very directly from from the books. It said these are the real characters. We're going to use the characters, and we're going to do the Falcone family drama
Yeah.
justice in of itself.
And I love it, like the world building in this show. It's become a meme at this point for all the the MCU Disney Plus stuff. It's like, oh, we gotta wait for like obligatory cameo. In this show, we only kind of get Mackenzie Bach, who I only really know because Con O'Neill
Hmm.
plays Izzy on Our Flag Means Death,
Oh yeah.
and like that's another one of my favorite shows. But apart, like, there's no Batman shuts down the whole Bliss operation. Like, there's some teases, as like we'll get to, but there's no like this is it. This is your cast.
Which I really like. I like that
Yeah.
I walked in and I it was all contained. I really didn't even need to watch the Batman to understand most of the show. Anything that was like honestly, I don't think I felt like there were any real connections to the world of the Batman
Hmm.
outside of the last episode and
And
maybe
maybe
some
the
mention
Arkham
of the
stuff.
Arkham, I guess, and maybe some
Yeah.
mentions of Batman at the beginning and the Riddler or whatever else. But like once the show gets going, it is
Yeah.
really contained within its own story, which was really nice. And I think
I really.
I saw Matt Reeves
Yeah.
say like, "Well, why doesn't Batman appear or whatever else?" And he said it takes place a week after like Gotham is attacked, and he's doing other stuff. And he said,
Hmm.
which is a hint for the Batman Part Two, is that he said like in the second movie he's going to find out that it's really hard to be Batman. Like he
Yep.
just can't be in all places at all times. And so this is a good example of that. I mean, even in the comics, like stuff happens.
Hmm.
Batman's not there. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
like someone's got a new operation doing this thing, and he can't. Like it's already moving.
No, I
And
remember people were like they just needed to like give Batman a nod or a mention. And like even if you trace it back to the comic, because it's clear Matt Reeves is doing his a No Man's Land.
yeah, this
Like
is his
Bruce,
no man's land, right?
yeah, like Bruce in that book, Batman's missing because he's dealing with all like government officials and
Hmm.
things like that. So like I just thought that's what they were doing. It's not a big we can't get Robert Pattinson back. It's just like organic
Just
world building,
right.
like
I
we
just
said.
don't think you needed him. Like that's one. I think why Batman is one of my favorite comic characters is that because his supporting cast, but then like the supporting cast of the supporting cast is this really strong character work pretty much across the board. So you don't
Mhm.
actually need Batman in the world of Gotham to like have a good time,
Yeah.
right? And I think that this show, in some ways, even more than the show Gotham, which
I
was
was gonna say
also
we had a 10-year show with no Batman.
yeah, that
All
was
of us
no
care.
5 seasons. I think Gotham was 5 seasons.
Yeah.
Four or five. But
Mhm.
like it had Bruce Wayne, which was
Yeah.
fine. But like you can do a show about Gotham and its supporting characters without Batman. Let's talk some Easter eggy stuff. Like in the final
Mhm.
episode, Sophia gets a letter from Selena Kyle.
Sophia's great.
So we need to go back and talk about Sophia, but let's do the Easter eggy stuff first. So, so like there's Sophia, like gets a letter from Selena
Mhm.
Kyle. There's the bat signal at the end, all
Yeah.
fine. And then I didn't. ping this when I was watching it, but I've seen a lot of people talk about it online now. Where when Oz goes into the when Oz goes into one of the courtrooms or whatever it is, the council chamber, all the curtains are dramatically in the shape of owls, and so kind of hinting at Court of Owls. And I feel that's far too purposeful to be incorrect, especially since the way they've talked about like the
Mhm.
second movie. It's everyone's like, oh, it's Court of Owls, which is great. I'm very excited for that.
Court of Owls makes so much sense for this
Especially
next
since
one.
if the whole first movie is about like the corruption of individuals and who actually pulls the strings and whatever else. And so to just like peel that layer back even further within the second movie with the
Hmm.
Court of Owls, fantastic.
Oh, could
Absolutely.
you imagine after seeing The Lighthouse and just how good of an actor Pattinson is, how raw the maze
Oh, the
scene
labyrinth scene.
is
Yes,
gonna, yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
Ah,
It's going to be awesome. Yeah, can't wait. Absolutely. Yeah, I
yeah.
completely agree. Well,
Hmm.
let's go. Unless you have other Easter eggs you want to talk about, I want to go back and talk about Sophia.
There's one thing that I like wanted to like share on a public platform, and it's the fact that I think it's in episode 5. Penguin has TikTok on his phone, so that means that he knows about the Costco guys.
Oh my gosh. I thought you were going to say the show
And
takes place before January 2025. We knew.
no, I'm just thinking about that because even though, like we said, he's become more of a character than just like the big Italian guy. Like that's what they're known for. So I just think that's really funny.
Well, you're lucky that you got some flashbacks with him as a kid and you're like, no, no, no. That's who he was before TikTok. It's cool. We already knew he
It's
was
a
like that.
double chunk chocolate cook.
No, 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 no. I want to talk about Sophia because I
Hmm.
think as much as Colin was a a standout in the show, like Sophia Falcone was equally a standout.
Yeah,
In some ways, if not more.
I was gonna say I think I like her more.
Yeah, I think she's doing less of a bit in
Hmm.
some ways, right?
Yeah.
So because just by the nature of the way they've molded the character. But this like whereas Oz is we can call Oz's story a tragedy if
Hmm.
we want to, because tragic things have happened in it. However, he is responsible for the tragedy in his own life purposefully,
Yep.
and he does not see the actions that he has done as tragic. So his story is not tragic. His
Hmm.
story, as the show says, is about the devil, and he is the devil, and it's awesome, which is something that you normally ping on the Joker. So I actually really love that it's like
And the Joker
getting
didn't do that.
he did not. No, it's getting thrown right at the penguin. I really like that. And so, I mean, Oz is responsible purposely for the deaths of his brothers and the
Mhm.
tragic decline in his mother. And where she like is like, I'm going to kill my son because he killed my kids, but instead I'm going to manipulate him and like because I can't
Yep.
kill one more child can't die no matter what he's done. It's just really complex and layered storytelling. But Sophia's is actually a tragedy because all
Yeah.
she tries to do is the right thing early in her life, right?
Mhm.
Like a lot of philanthropy for abused women and all this stuff. And her own father sends her to Arkham to cover up his own crimes, which then turns her into an abused woman herself, the very people that she was trying to help. But then she can't escape the very cycle that she was kind of put into, as many abused people
Yeah.
cannot. They cannot escape their own cycle of abuse. And so like
No,
Arkham, instead of
it's
curing
really
her,
good.
turns her into the very thing that she is like trying to help and overcome. And it's just really sad. It's just really sad.
It is, yeah. Like all the is episode 4 the Sophia episode?
I'm
Or is it
not
episode 3?
positive, but I can use we typically on the show only do one lookup a person, but
Mhm.
I will use this as my lookup for you. How's that?
Awesome.
Yes, episode 4 is her
Okay.
Arkham episode.
Yeah, everything in episode 4, like, it's just so good. Kristen Melody is honestly, I think she's my favorite actor on the show, just in general.
Which is saying something
Despite
considering
how
that
good,
you
yeah.
have like Clancy Brown and Colin
Yeah.
Farrell
And
and
you know how much I love Clancy
I
Brown.
know you love Clancy. You love him so much.
Oh, yeah.
Even Shoray my gosh.
I know
Um
who you're talking about.
yep, she has the really cool voice, played Mrs. Maroney.
Yeah, I
But
know her from Arcane.
yes,
Yeah.
she was that doctor in X-Men The Last
Mhm.
Stand that one time.
Yeah.
She's been on Star Trek, been all over the place.
Yeah.
But like they're all great. All great.
Mhm.
What the show did with Sophia Falcone is like the show's called The Penguin, but it is also about her, which I really like. But I like that it's not in service of Oz. You know, like it could have
Yeah.
gone into like obviously Oz comes out on what he sees as the top at the end, but I don't feel that like Sophia was just used to get him there. Like it was
Right.
real plot conflict where it could have been either of them. And truthfully, what I love more than anything, even though this was absolutely worse for her, is that she's not dead at the end of the show.
So good. I miss when
Villains didn't die.
villains didn't have to die
Yeah.
every cinematic thing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Like,
I love when a villain stays alive.
the only real consistent villains in, like, comic book movies and stuff are, like, Gene Hackman, Lex, and, like, Magneto,
And Magneto. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Ooh,
you
it's a good
know?
own question. So Gene Hackman's Lex is in 3 out of the 4 Superman movies.
Mhm.
Magneto is in 3 plus X-Men movies. Loki, I guess, would be
Loki, I guess, yeah.
another one.
But, yeah, it's such a cool feeling that, like, we're getting obviously, we have, like this universe already has, like, a ton of villains with Penguin, Riddler,
who also didn't
Joker.
die at the end of the
Yeah.
movie, worth noting. Yes. If I was kind of mapping, I was thinking about like the Batman Part 2 and Batman Part 3, and I feel like if Part 2 is the Court of Owls, if it's contained within the Court of Owls, and the court in a lot of ways is what is unknowing to Batman and everybody else unknowingly like constraining the like in weird way the madness of the city. And
Mhm.
so then if their demise at the end of 2 means the full unleashing of, you know, like all this
The rise of the
chaos, the
supervillains and
rival
stuff.
supervillains,
Yeah.
yeah, in some ways that could be a very cool story.
Yeah, no.
Potentially character overloaded, but still cool.
But yeah, one of my favorite bits, which originally wasn't back in the Batman, was when the Joker scene happened in Arkham. Because as DC fans, we like kind of see Joker, and we're like, oh, they have to do an obligatory thing with the clown guy.
Sure.
But I rewatched the movie not that long ago for Halloween stuff. It's very, very clear that scene was like death to the mobsters and like rise of the
Mhm.
supervillain,
Absolutely.
especially with like Oz. We didn't really know it at the end of the movie,
Mhm.
but like becoming more like his comic counterpart ish.
Yes, I would
Yeah.
agree with that. Yep.
And like I'm really interested because Sophia Falcone, she's like in the books just another person to die in like Long Halloween.
Yep.
Like it's really
No.
interesting.
Dark Victory. Pretty sure she's
Oh
surrounded in
yeah.
Dark Victory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. but like it's really interesting that like they're going to the extent to kill all the other like mob guys apart from like Penguin, and I get like Black Mask if he shows up,
Yep.
that they're keeping Sophia. And I think that's just like a
That's
testament as to how good of a character she is, how much story potential Matt Reeves and co are like cooking up.
Yep, they see in her. Well, I mean, they also like look at it in a way that going back to Arkham is much worse fate for her than death.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's
I
the
also like how Arkham is just hell
it's
in this.
terrible. Yeah, even
Yeah.
though like all you see is like like you see an interview room or like an examination room and
Hmm.
the hallways and the rooms, but it is
Yeah.
a terrible place. Like it's so claustrophobic in the way that it's shot and
Yeah.
like designed, and it's kind of like octagonal-ish kind of look. It's really well thought out. Something
Yeah.
that we have
No,
not talked
even.
about with Sophia that I do want to talk about is her
Hmm.
like wardrobe and like the decline.
It's really good.
Because this, I saw this thread online, which was great. I'll see if I can find it, but to link it. But it, you can obviously watch that her hairstyle changes and becomes a little bit more
Hmm.
manic as her story degrades. But if you watch her outfits, it also is like that she starts in like this really 1940s like classic mobster Italian, like Godfather esque
Hmm.
style, and she slowly devolves away from that as she is like
Yeah.
just like breaking away from her family, and it like moves to this like punk 80s look. Like it is really well thought. Like everything in the show, if I have not said this enough, is really well thought out. Like there's
Hmm.
like there's some great visual imagery. You and I texted about
Yeah.
this like in that first episode. Like every time a big
The
important like
crossroads.
every time a crossroads moment happens, there's a train that goes by or
Hmm.
stops and like stuff like that. It's just really 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 good. Uh,
It's so good.
one thing I do want to mention before we kind of wrap up on everything, I want to talk about Victor and his path
I was
because
just thinking, yeah.
yeah, so Victor's
Which, by the way, why would you name a character Vic
because he's a
apart
victim.
from, you know,
Yeah, he's a victim. That's why he's a
there were
victim of
so many people just
circumstance.
being like, I saw some people like, but it's Victor S, it's Victor Freeze, it's Victor Stone.
You know, it's so funny because I like ignored all of that through this whole show. I wasn't looking for any like, is this character really this character? This like, I just watched the show
Yeah,
and I
that's
had
probably for
a
the best.
10 out of 10. Like, had a great time because I wasn't expecting anything like that. Even like the Court of Owls drapings or whatever else. That's not where my mind was because the show was so engaging within its
Now we
own
all know
world.
in the Batman Part 2, Vic is just going to become Mr. Freeze.
Now, of course, obviously makes the most sense.
Yep.
No,
Which I sound,
what I really just
yeah.
loved about the show is that Victor is obviously the heart of the show, right? He's just the
Hmm.
good guy drawn into terrible circumstances and like you see his decline. But what I love, which was such a bold and uncomfortable choice, is that like Oz and Victor become so close, they see each other at their most vulnerable, and Oz can't have that, so he strangles and kills Victor. But
Mm,
because Victor is the heart of the show, like Penguin in his own way, like kills his own heart. Any last remnant of virtue or feeling or goodness that is left inside of him, he kills with his own hands and stomps out and
yeah.
leaves for dead. It's just really,
It's
really
raw.
raw and unsettling in its own way. Even the way that he kills him, it's like long and mangled. Like he could have shot him.
Hmm.
He could have done a lot of things to kill him instantly. And it's a sadly slow death that he
Yeah.
gives to this guy who he brought in himself because he saw enough of himself in this kid, right? You know, the
Yeah.
disability and whatever else. And that's really what in this time that passes, this like, you know, he still feels something. He's still Penguin is still human in some way. And by
Yeah.
the end of this show, by doing this, he like kills off whatever is left of his own humanity by killing Victor. And it is because he
It's
kills
so good.
the weakness within him. It's just really
Mhm.
good because the show doesn't say any of that. That's what I love. Like it's there for you to think about, to analyze, and because other shows, especially comic book shows, would like turn to camera and be like,
Mhm.
"So anyway, I can't believe I just killed Victor, the guy that was the representation of my heart, and now
Yeah.
I have no heart." Looks down at camera, so I just love that it was just there for us to take in. It's awesome. It was just really good.
Oh yeah, I thought like I expected the Vic death coming, which that was really funny as we were texting.
That was so great. Like
He was like,
Victor's
"I
such a
love Vic
great guy.
so
I love
much."
Vic so much. 50 minutes later, man,
It's
that's
like
upsetting.
throughout the entirety of the show, there's things like his girlfriend and like
Hmm.
the interconnectivity to the Batman. That's another thing that like I really love because it's just organic world building. The fact that his folks got killed
Hmm.
in Riddler's like bombing of the city,
Well, in a lot of
which
ways, it's
that
almost like
that's
you actually
yeah.
miss that feeling in the movie, like because you're not
Hmm.
connected to anybody that like goes
Yeah.
through any particular type of struggles. So then, like, you
Hmm.
really it makes it so what Riddler has done so much
Yeah.
worse because not only did the Riddler like kill Vic's family, but it led to Vic's
Hmm.
moral like decline and then his own death. Like
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
yeah, really
And I
cool.
also like that scene illustrates that like I remember when the Batman came out, everybody was like Riddler was in the right because everybody was like corrupt or whatever. It's still showing like Edward Nashon is insane.
That excellent point. Had not considered that
Yeah.
because Riddler's whole point is to like stick it to the man and the 1% and everything, but all
Hmm.
he ended up doing is hurting people who are already hurting, who
Yeah.
actually because of the city. So he didn't really fix anything. Like he just hurt innocent people, like actual
Hmm.
innocent people. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I love Vic was one of my favorite characters. The club scene when it's like he's getting PTSD and I don't remember if he's on Bliss or if he's
I don't
just
think
like
so. I
getting the
think it's
PTSD from
just
the
PTSD
lights.
from the lights. Yep.
Yeah. But like that scene is so good because like people apart from even Oz like care about Victor. That's how I thought he was gonna die at first. Because you know how the mom is like really nice to Victor. I thought originally Oz was gonna see him as like a threat because of like how unstable the relationship is with his mom. Which kinda it is, but not I mean, that's pulling a stretch.
A little bit of a stretch, but I know what
Yeah.
you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, one thing if people have not watched the show and they want to go back and watch it after our conversation, where we spoiled some things, but not all things. There's actually a lot
Not
in here we have
all.
not talked about, which is fine. But
We talked about TikTok more than some of the
some
pivotal
things, yeah.
moments.
But there is something I do want to pin people's attention towards when they're watching it is how well scenes of communion are used. So like when people are
Mm,
eating together, it's like a sign of bonding and friendship or whatever. And like there's so many of those in this show. Maybe because so many of them are Italian. And so like there's like just like a lot of like people eating and like bonding over those moments and whatever else. And I think all the way starting in episode 1, it's almost in every scene. One of the best ones is with Maroni and Sophia, where he's
mhm.
cooking Iranian food like
Yeah.
after some stuff has happened, and he's like walking her through it and telling her about it. Like, but so not only is it bonding
With the
over
yogurt,
food,
yeah.
but it's bonding over a different ideologies or different cultures or different ways of doing things because
Yeah.
they're from opposite mob families or like and
Mhm.
everything. And so it's like the bridging of their two, I don't know, vice
Yeah.
styles.
I also really like how Maroney never technically allies with the Falcone. Like
That's right,
she's
because
Gigante.
she's a gigante or whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
Gigante.
yeah,
Yeah,
very good point. Very good
like this.
point.
This show is so good,
I don't
and I
normally go
like.
back and rewatch things, but I will go back and watch this again.
Yeah,
Like that's
like I said,
mhm.
it's prestige, but it's not like beat you over the head with it. You
Nope.
know,
Nope. It is
it's
not
still
beat you
like
over the head
very
with it.
much a comic show.
And every episode is worth your time. It's just always a new. There wasn't a weak episode in the bunch. Every single one just really hits home. It's
I also
awesome.
like how the show it starts out like there's not this big massive conspiracy or whatever, like who inherits Carmine's like Penguin just kills Alberto
Hmm.
because he
Hmm.
made fun of him.
Yep. Just I love that that connects to things later in the show, but also you're
Yeah,
right. It's just like this heat of the moment decision
it's a thing that
s-
happens.
spirals so much. It's just wild how in a lot of ways realistic that is. Maybe not like the murder necessarily as like full on realism, but like how one decision can literally change the course of someone's entire life
Right.
and then the lives of so many people and on and on and on from there. It's just right because
Yeah.
if like he
No,
didn't do that, maybe
this
he
is
would have
such a
left
great
earlier.
show.
He never would have met Vic and like so on and so on and so on
Hmm.
and so on from there. Just a really, really good show. And I people are talking about season two.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want a season two because like
I don't want a season two. I've told people I do not want one.
this story told the story it was going to tell, and I have to see the Batman 2 to know like what would be worth telling after that.
Hmm.
Because like when they announced the show, they were like, "It's the rise of the Penguin in crime families in the underworld." And I'm like, "Well, that's great. That's awesome,
Yeah.
100%." But but it's not my job to come up with these things. That's their job. So hopefully, but
Mhm.
as in the world of the Batman, 2 for 2. In the world of the new DC studios right now, 2 for 2. Every
Two for
like,
two.
so I'm very excited. But
Yeah, like I would much rather like a Catwoman show. The Arkham show DCU or is it still this? I don't
I think
remember.
the Arkham show is dead. I'm
Because
pretty sure that went by the
I
wayside,
remember like it was originally a GCPD show,
which became the Arkham
and
show.
then
And
it
I think
changed.
there's
Yeah.
something else. There's something still working in there, but I do like that it's its own little
Hmm.
offshoot, like of the
Yeah.
DCU.
Which, by the way,
I don't want
speaking
it
of
in the real DCU.
yeah, speaking of the Arkham stuff, I like how, like I said, everybody is somebody. Like Magpie,
Yes, right.
Being Sophia like, and she's not like a Poison Ivy where it's like,
No, they
yeah,
use poison ivy in a
you
weird
introduce
way.
the villain.
Yeah, no, you use magpie. Like right
Yeah,
on. Like good for you. No one's ever going to use
just a
magpie.
cool way to establish your villains.
Yep, I agree. Yep. Well, Bobby, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us on Beer with Geeks. You can find us on Beer with Geeks at beerwithgeeks.com. And you can find us on, X and Instagram and whatever else. And you can find all other Thought Bubble audio shows at thoughtbubbleaudio.com. So until next time, cheers.